Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. Thank you all very much for joining us today. My name is Wesley Isaacs, and I am a tax partner within EY's corporate law group based in our Toronto office, and I'll be your moderator for today. As part of my practice, I'm lucky to get to work closely with many family-run and owner-managed businesses, supporting them by getting the right corporate and personal tax structures in place, both for their businesses and their family. And in keeping with that theme of having the right supporting structures in place for business and for family, today we're going to be discussing a topic that is coming up more and more with our clients, and that's the pros and cons of a family office and when is it the right move. We're very excited to have you all with us for what is certain to be a truly insightful discussion, and one that's relevant not only to individual clients, but also for family offices and those advising family offices. And so today we're going to hear from our Canadian Family Enterprise leader, Tina DeVito, and a very special guest, Rick Eckstein. But before I introduce them, let me quickly go over some housekeeping matters and our agenda for today. So first, we encourage you to submit questions into the Q&A chat box. Time permitting, we'll get to as many questions as we can. If we don't get to your question today, we'll respond via email after the event. The slides and replay will be sent out early next week, so if you want to view this again, or if you have colleagues who may be interested in the topic, it will be available for replay. Today's agenda is going to begin with a quick overview of what the Canadian family landscape looks like today and how it's evolved over the years. We'll then look at triggers for creating a family office and common pros and cons, along with some key insights from EY's single family office survey. And last but not least, we'll conclude with a Q&A discussion where we'll hear firsthand what it's like creating and operating a family office. Our speakers today have a tremendous amount of experience working with and even operating family businesses and family offices. And we hope that hearing about their experience will be beneficial for you today. And so with that, let me introduce our speakers. First, you'll hear from my colleague, Tina DeVito. Tina is our Canadian Family Enterprise leader, and in this role, she supports family legacy by advising family businesses, their owners, and family members on how to protect, grow, and improve their family enterprise, while in turn dealing with the complex issues and family dynamics of business succession and establishing and managing a family office. Tina's extensive consulting experience encompasses strategic tax, estate planning, succession planning, stewardship of wealth, and philanthropy. She's helped families articulate vision, values, and goals, and develop governance policies that guide families through succession and intergenerational planning. Next, we'll get to hear from our special guest, Rick Eckstein. Before establishing Phase 3 Associates in 2016, Rick was president and CEO of Weston Forest Products and the Weston Forest Group of companies, conducting business in over 40 countries across 4 continents. The Weston companies have repeatedly won a variety of awards, including Canada's Best Managed Companies, Profit 500's Fastest Growing Companies, and Waterstone Canada's Most Admired Corporate Cultures. Rick is going to be participating in our Q&A session with me, and we are extremely thrilled to have him. And so with that, let's jump right in. Tina, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Wesley. So let's start off with talking a little bit about family office. You may be hearing a lot about family offices these days, and traditionally the term referred to single family offices. And today, multi-family offices and professional services firms provide a variety of family office type services to their clients. But the focus for today is the single family office. And there's no legislation that really defines what a family office can do or what specifies the naming convention. So it's really hard to know exactly how many there are in Canada. But what we do know is that some of the largest families, business owning families, have established single family offices. And you just might not recognize them because the family name is often not included in the name of the office. Single-family offices tend to have at least $100 million in investable assets, or about $1 billion of net worth for it to make sense from a cost perspective. But we'll talk a little bit more about cost later on. Research says that one of the greatest challenges for single-family offices is really just not having a qualified successor to take over. Even so, prevalence of the family office approach will continue to increase as wealth and complexity increase. So let's begin by looking at the evolution of family offices. And as you can see, they can take many forms, and hence the reason why there is no one size fits all. In general, a family office may take care of all of the personal and financial and non-financial planning and reporting for a family, but not all family offices start that way. As family wealth increases and business needs get more complex, the family grows in number, the family office may evolve from a simple structure where perhaps an assistant supports the business owner with some personal and sometimes financial tasks to what we refer to as an embedded family office, where one or more of the employees of the operating company are the ones that support the needs of the business owner as well as some family members. In these situations, there's really very little separation and therefore lack of privacy between the personal affairs of the family and the affairs of the operating business. And this may cause conflict of interest for those employees who are actually managing both. Later, that embedded family office may evolve into separate teams who oversee things like family investments, tax returns, bookkeeping, succession planning, family education, and family governance, to the point where a complex full-service office is established by the family. And now the structure could revert back over time as assets change or the family branches decide to separate their wealth and go their own way. So from a strategic perspective, it's really important to review where the needs are today and what they may look like in the next 5 to 10 years. Consider both the family and the business needs, as well as the investment strategy, to really determine if a refresh or a retooling of your existing family office is appropriate to meet those changing needs. And this is why family offices will in fact look different from one another, and that's okay. Remember that the needs of the family that the office is going to be serving are unique to that family, and so it makes sense that the family office too will be very different. Now on this next page, you'll see that there are a number of triggering factors that could result in the desire to create a single family office. Very commonly, the sale of a business or the goal to diversify holdings outside of the operating company results in investment capital. And this requires a different skill set to manage than your current operating company employees. And remember that they were hired to grow and manage your operating business and not make decisions on public or private investments. In addition, if you've sold your business, this might mean that you've actually lost your trusted VP finance or confidant because they stayed behind with the business operations. And in that case, you may need to reestablish a new team of professionals to work with to help you manage your new set of assets. You know, in some cases, we've seen families turn to multifamily offices for this reason, and they pool wealth from a number of other families, which allows for economies of scale, both in terms of investing as well as cost sharing. And this may be just a temporary move until the family is ready to go at it alone, or sometimes a permanent one. And I've seen some families that are established specifically to support the preservation of family legacy by formalizing family values, the alignment of family around the future vision, facilitating communication amongst multi-generations, and educating those rising generations as well. And family legacy is really both financial and non-financial. And it's the non-financial legacy that will strengthen and help preserve the financial legacy. And the family office may also be tasked to design, update, implement a succession plan and wealth transfer plan. And they often are also tasked to monitor and keep those plans up to date. And I know I've touched on this already, but sometimes family matters become too time consuming, too complex, and it makes sense to separate those activities from the operating company, so that those employees that you have running your business can focus their efforts on the business and not on the needs of the individual family members. So to summarize on this next page, a single family office typically has 3 core purposes: coordination, responsiveness, and support. They coordinate all the services and activities really from the center of the owners, the families, the businesses, and the investments that they own. They are responsive to the family in 4 key areas: legacy and values, and this again includes the non-financial legacy, leadership, both within the family and the operating business, ownership in order to create responsible owners and what we call patient capital, and wealth transition, including family dynamics, preparing the next generation to inherit, as well as steward the wealth. And this, of course, leads to long-term family success because they support the family to protect, grow, and improve both the family and the business. And as you can see on this next page, as we support our clients through this decision-making process, we work through some of the pros and cons with them to determine what's most important for the family. Let's review some of those now, and this is just a few. Separating the family business and the family assets actually provides privacy and confidentiality because there's a limited number of family office employees who will have information on family members, including all of their personally owned assets, their taxes, and other personal and private information. And this is a really important reason to establish a single family office. Plus, the family benefits from having a clear line of sight and control over the activities in the family office, because it is their family office. Risk management is better coordinated and handled when everything is under one roof and the full picture is taken into consideration, both from an investment management and overall decision-making and planning perspective. And education for the next generation is focused, it's deliberate, and it can be ongoing. And the family office may be established to provide some personal services to family members. And this is really an advantage because they can then act within their role as the go-between between the advisors as well as the family office. And that can be a cost saving here by also pooling family wealth and the planning activities through a centralized family office. And as we've already mentioned, the family office will often coordinate all of the external advisors that are supporting the family individually, and this includes outside professionals, and it ensures alignment of interests between the family and all of their potential advisors, and helps to streamline communication between the parties, but actually also helps to get the process moving forward so things don't get stuck in the decision making. Now, on the other hand, we've got a few cons here as well, and they include the obvious, the cost to set up and operate the family office, both initially and as the family's needs evolve. I'm always asked about the costs, and here again, there's no simple answer, and costs really are driven by the expertise and the number of staff required by your family office, as well as how they are compensated. And you can't forget costs included in technology, operating costs. And so really the range can vary significantly, and it's very difficult to give a cost range without identifying what the objective of that family office is and what the family is willing to have delivered by that family office. And these days, really market changes as well as increased tax, legal complexity, puts pressure on the family office employees to stay current as well as relevant, and not just in Canada, but potentially on a global basis. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. And finally, identifying staff that actually has the expertise needed, and also managing that staff, minimizing turnover while providing career growth opportunities can be an ongoing challenge for single family offices. You know, in addition to the pros and cons comes the question of make versus buy. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll see some considerations here. And even if you decide to move forward with the family office, it really doesn't mean that you should deliver all of the services yourself, and at least not initially. Even the largest family offices that we work with will often assess and reassess on a regular basis whether to outsource and what to outsource. And outsourcing can provide great benefits in cost efficiencies, access to specialized know-how. And there are some considerations before deciding what services you're going to build in-house and what services should be outsourced. And you really should consider that in a way to obtain the right balance to meet the family expectations and their changing needs. So here you can see some examples of things to consider, and I hope it'll provoke some discussion within your own family or family office. Again, consider whether specialized professional expertise is needed. For instance, in the area of technology and infrastructure, data confidentiality, accounting and tax compliance as it's getting more and more complex, as well as family governance. And those expertise can be brought in when needed. In the end, the family office and the family should discuss, again, their priorities, what will be delivered in-house, what will be outsourced, and establish a really good working relationship with those external providers so that everyone is kept informed on all planning initiatives and everyone is on the same page. So now I'd like to share some best practices as well, and what's top of mind for the world's leading family offices. And this is as a result of a survey that we conducted with 250 of the world's leading single family offices. Our aim was to gather some insights and share them with you into the priorities of what today's family offices are concerned with in a very high pressure and fast changing environment. The study was commissioned to get to the heart of what single family offices perceive as their own capabilities and where they see growth opportunities and market challenges. So what are they doing currently? How do they feel they are progressing towards their goals, and what's preventing them from moving forward? So here are 4 subjects that we spoke to them about, and you can find more detail on our EY Canada website on this particular report. The report was called How Single Family Offices Are Balancing Tradition and Transformation. But here are the highlights. In the area of wealth and regulation, 64% say that they're not very confident in their tax operations, that they're performing at a high level. And this next one is growing in importance. There's a sense of urgency to transform to digital, but at the same time, we've got to address the cybersecurity needs. 81% of those we talked to said they're going to make an investment of 3 or more digital technologies in the upcoming year. When it comes to risk and reputation, again, it's that process of having something in place to identify and manage those risks. And finally, this was a very interesting one, when measuring the performance of the family office, 83% said that it's important to measure and optimize non-financial performance. And I think this is a trend that's going to continue. So let's go to the next slide. And there's a little bit more information here under wealth and regulation. And again, it's the fact that change is increasing so quickly and that it's very difficult to keep up with increased transparency required by both domestic and foreign governments. I mean, we've seen this in Canada already with the new trust reporting rules, asking for disclosure of beneficiaries and so on. We've seen it in the area of home ownership and real estate, so this isn't going to go away. Another concern is remote workings, especially since COVID-19. The fact that employees are moving across jurisdictions raises a lot of issues around taxation. So if this sounds like you, this is definitely an area where professional advice is needed. Again, with digital transformation, there's going to be a lot more attention here because 74% of the family offices we talked to had some sort of cybersecurity breach. They're trying to increase digital technology, but at the same time manage cybersecurity, and this risk is only going to grow. And I think it's something that really on an annual basis, a family office should review and test and have a process to educate family members. Under risk and reputation, this is an area where more work needs to be done. Less than a third said that they address risk management and make key decisions at the highest levels of the organization. Smaller firms, smaller family offices are further behind in this particular area. And larger ones still have a way to go, but definitely an area of risk and reputation is of key importance to family offices. And as for strategy and governance, remember that we said that 80% responded that non-financial metrics were important. Well, only 30% of family offices said they do monitor non-financial metrics. But really, I think this is something that's going to continue to grow. 44% are going to be actually looking at the family's ethics, values, society, and the environment when making investment decisions. And a lot of this is driven by the younger generation, and it will be interesting to see how this evolves over time. So there you have it, a super quick overview of family offices. And whether you're thinking about establishing a family office, or you already have one, or if you are currently employed by a family office, I hope this discussion provided you with some ideas, more importantly, some questions for you to think about. And I thank you for your attention, and now I want to turn it back to Wesley.
Thanks so much, Tina. It was a great presentation and very relevant to many watching right now. I think especially based on the questions that are starting to come in. Maybe before we get to the next portion of our webcast, one very specific question came in. I think we can address quickly. The question is, are estate freezes still an effective strategy? It seems like the CRA is leaning towards attributing income from the next generation if they don't work in the family office. And so I think that's true. It is a lot harder now to split income than it used to be. But that doesn't mean that estate freezes aren't extremely valuable as far as a planning strategy. The biggest bang for your buck from an estate freeze tends to come from being able to significantly reduce the taxes that your estate is going to have to pay when eventually, unfortunately, you pass away. And so estate freezes are really a key tool that we still use all the time to preserve wealth for the next generation. And so maybe it's not as much about splitting income with your family members, although there are still strategies, but really about preserving the fundamental wealth for your family. Sorry for that. With that, it is now my sincere pleasure to switch gears and turn to the Q&A portion of our event with our very special guest, Rick Eckstein. As I mentioned at the top, Rick is known first for his role as president and CEO of the Weston Forest Group of Companies, and after exiting that business, going on to found his very own family office, Phase 3 Associates. Rick, thank you for being with us today. It's a real pleasure to have you. Oh, Rick, I think you're on mute.
Okay, sorry, is that better?
Yes, great.
Okay, technology is not my specialty, but thank you very much for having me, and so much of what Tina showed in those slides just resonated, like I've been there and done that, so good presentation.
So Rick, just now Tina talked about trigger points for setting up a family office, and I was hoping you could tell us about your business background and what were the specific trigger points in your business, in your journey, where you decided to create a family office. What were the considerations that you looked at when making that decision?
So I'll give you in 60 seconds my business history, and then it'll kind of lead us to where we are. But my dad was a part owner in a small lumber yard when I was a young man. And when I started full-time after university, I think I was employee number 12, and Dad owned about a third of the company and made $50,000 a year. I had started at age 8 with a broom, at 14 driving a forklift, at 16 driving truck, which paid for university. And I wanted to be in that business. And within 3 years, Dad and I owned 100% of the business, and we made $1 million net, and we never looked back. By the time I was late 40s, I was managing partner of 6 companies. My brother was managing 1, and we were operating in 40 countries around the world, and I was never home. And I'm a planner. I love to know what's coming next, and people told me that it's important to start your planning for your exit 10 years in advance. So at the age of 50, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I started the planning, and there was sort of 2 parts, is getting myself ready to figure out what to do, and then the second part is providing succession in the companies. So I knew what I wanted. I wanted to do something different, and till now I had been laser focused on our business. So I started dipping my toe into politics, into public speaking. I wanted to be in a public board. I wanted to do some philanthropy, some writing, and some more learning about business. I knew about two asset classes, which was the lumber business and then the real estate that we sat on. So I needed to learn all about the various sectors, whether it be VC, private equity, and everything that I didn't even know that I didn't know. And I learned about portfolio design, different asset classes, liquidity, the language of investing. And slowly I learned, on top of everything else, that the skills that I had were completely transferable to other things. So my future slowly over a 10-year period became clearer. At the same time, we still had 6 operating companies. As part and parcel of that transition, we sold one, we merged a couple. We created 3 big companies, and we allowed executives to start buying in as partners. And we used coaches, mentors, peer groups to elevate our leadership teams so that we could make a smooth transition. One we ended up selling 100% to a publicly traded company. One we sold the majority to a U.S. private equity company. Myself and my team still retain a little bit of that. And the other one, my very capable brother-in-law was running, and I kept selling shares down until I own about 20% of that. And when I was 59, I accomplished my goal of not being the managing partner of anything and not being the majority shareholder of anything. Those 3 companies today, if we still own them, but they're all operating from 40 years ago at $1.8 million top line, or somewhere in the $800 million top line point. And then it was ready to start the next phase of my life, the family office, and I named it Phase 3.
Excellent, excellent. And so you went through that journey and went on to found Phase 3 Associates. Obviously, a family office does many things, but what do you consider to be the primary function of your family office, and how do you support that? How do you staff that?
So I agree with, again, the presentation earlier, where you first have to figure out what you want to do. And I had narrowed it down, and it's taken 6 years now to the point where it's fully functioning. But I have, 4 pillars of what we do, and we journeyed from myself and a part-time bookkeeper to 12 full-time people now. So the first pillar is the investment and finance group, or as we call it, the money-making group that supports all of our other things. It's run by my son-in-law, Michael, the one who sold the publicly traded company. And we've put together a very diverse portfolio across several asset classes, from real estate, venture capital, private equity. Some we do direct and we bring in partners to help us. Some other people bring us in as investors. And we also own part of a VC company that's got about $400 million of assets under management at the moment. We also have some equities, debt, and a few other asset classes, but this is the money maker. The second foundation, or second pillar, is my wife and I, who are both first-generation Canadians. Our parents came here with nothing. We wanted to do something to say thank you to Canada for being so good to us. And after a lot of research, we settled on helping military families. It was virgin territory. Nobody had ever done anything like that before. Without the support of the family, I couldn't do what I did. Without the support of the families, our military can't do what we did. My daughter, who was on maternity leave, came in one day to help me a little bit, doing this off the corner of my desk. She proceeded to fire me. She hired a proper CEO, made her the COO, and they turned this little bit of philanthropy that my wife and I were doing into a huge organization today that's recognized across the military, and we're having real impact. The third thing that was of major interest to me was the Jewish community. Again, our family are all Holocaust survivors, so I created a pillar to fight anti-Semitism and Jewish hatred. And the third thing that was of interest to me is the conservative movement in Canada, because I believe in it, and also because having political connections, helps us with our advocacy work for the community. It helps us with our philanthropic work for the military, and it's very helpful in many of our businesses. We have a highly skilled young woman who worked on the Hill for many years, and along with my EA and ourselves, we're the 3 people in this silo, so for a total of about 12 people. And finally, I don't want to minimize my wife, who, while she's not in the office on a regular basis, she's really the glue that binds a lot of this together. And I call her my CEO, my Chief Emotional Officer. She's been my CEO for the last 42 years and is responsible for the majority of any success that I have.
Fantastic. And so with all that in mind, and clearly, it's a whole family involved, if you were to give one piece of advice to someone else who's looking at deciding to create a family office, what would it be? What would you say to that person who is just at the start of their journey? I
think I'd actually have 4 very simple pieces of advice around a central theme is knowing what you want. The first one is, do you want to be a passive investor or an active investor? Just use your office to manage your family finances and just invest passively, or something else? So I think that's the first decision you have to make. The second I would suggest is have a clear vision of what you want your life to look like. I had these 4 pillars, and establish what success looks like. And I think this has to be done in conjunction and conversation with your family. The third, which is very important to me, is build a network of coaches, advisors, legal, accounting, and even just friends who have done things before, friends who you respect in business, that you can call. I know I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I've got a whole network of people around me who are brighter than me, and I call them on a regular basis. And the last one I would suggest is build a network of other family offices and investors to partner on deals based on the value that they can bring. When we bring partners into a deal, or when somebody brings us in, it's not just to write a check. We want to know that they've got a particular skill set that if we need help, we can call on them. We've got a food business, and we brought in one of the investors, somebody that's been in the wholesale food business for years and years, figuring that he would be a resource if we ever needed him. So those are really 4 short answers to your question. So you just mentioned collaborating with other family offices, others in the same space. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that, say on deal flow or investments. What is that like? What's the culture of collaboration in your space? So again, we've both myself and my son-in-law Michael, who run the investing space, we spend a lot of time going out for lunch with people and getting to know people, finding people that we admire and just calling them up and say, hey, can we buy you lunch? First of all, you don't have to reinvent the wheel on everything that you're doing yourself. There's no question that there are people who've done it out there before, and that makes life a lot easier. Second of all, we find out if they've got the same philosophy as us, the same morals, the same ethics as we do. And we've been able to put together a real good network of about maybe 10 or 12, not a huge network, but 10 or 12 that think the way we do. And we talk a lot, and we share deal flow a lot. And we wouldn't get half the deal flow that we have if it wasn't for them. The other thing is Mike has found a couple of family office peer groups, and he's talked to them and has worked with them a little bit just to expand his network. But we think that network is critical to what we do. Everybody brings something different to the table. Fantastic. Well, we're getting a lot of questions coming in. Tina, I think some of these might be ideal for you to chime in on. One is, what is the most common structure of a family office? Corporation, LLC, partnership, LLC obviously being a more U.S. structure. Again, I can't tell you what anybody else except us. So we have the family office sort of as the umbrella structure, and then we've got a separate company for all of our investments, and then the philanthropic work, the philanthropic side. We're a registered charity. So that's the way we've done it. I can't tell you. I suppose there's 50 different permutations.
Or Tina, what are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you. I would agree with Rick, absolutely. And in fact, he stole my answer. I was going to say the exact same thing. It really depends on what you need the family office to do. There isn't a certain structure that is legislated and say, okay, this is a family office. And a family office is often exactly what Rick described, different organizational structures for different purposes. A foundation is a separate legal structure. But if there are investments, whether they're public or private equity opportunities, those usually sit in some sort of a corporate structure. So again, back to what we both Rick and I have been saying is what is the purpose of the family office? That will determine the structure that is best suited for it, as well as the employees. And there was another question actually in the chat around how are you paying, or what are the costs for the family office? Is it a basis point fee? Well, again, it depends on the purpose of that staff member. If you're hiring someone who's running the foundation, for instance, as in Rick's case, it wouldn't be a basis fee charge for that person. It would be a salary, for instance, commensurate with what they're doing and the activities that are being done within that foundation. If the investment arm is just solely investment management, and so you're looking for qualified portfolio managers or CFAs, they are much more commonly paid through a basis point calculation. If there is anything in between, family finances or other planning, family governance, then those tend to be costed a little differently, because there is no real asset base to the asset base is irrelevant to the services that are being provided. So I know it's not the great answer, but again, there's no one size fits all, and it will vary depending on the different parts of your family office.
Yeah, I just might add, Tina, it depends what you want to do. So when we stood up this foundation initially, I was paying for everything because it's something we wanted to do. It is over the last few years standing more and more and more on its own 2 feet. It still costs us a little bit of money, but we're happy to do that because that's what we wanted to accomplish. The fact that I've got somebody that just focuses on, the community and politics. I mean, I don't need that for the family office. That's a choice that I'm making. And then the last comment is when you talk about staff for the investment side, we made a couple of hiring mistakes along the way, but the 2 of our senior financial people, our CFO and our controller, both came from family offices, and we found that made a huge difference as opposed to hiring a corporate CEO.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, Rick, that's an excellent point. And I think I mentioned it maybe on page 1 or 2 of the presentation, is that the kind of employees you might need in your family office will likely have very different skills and experiences than those that you hire to run a manufacturing company or whatever, a real estate company. So that's really important point.
Fantastic. So I mean, maybe looking at the flip side of that. This question came in. I think Rick would be good to hear your input on this, and Tina as well. Which is, how do you monitor non-financial metrics? That is, how do you do it?
I mean, the simple answer is you have to determine upfront what does success look like. In the case of our foundation, it's how many dollars go out the door, how many families that we have helped. We created a military family appreciation day through our political connections on Parliament, how many views that we get. So for every one of our non-financial areas of activity, we do have metrics. It's not an exact science. It's what's important to you and what does success look like to you. And it might look totally different to somebody else than it does to me.
Yeah, I would agree, Rick. And just if I can add, if the family office, the purpose of the family office is to engage the next generation, to do education or manage some, create some family governance structures, well, then those are all non-financial metrics. And so they can be measured very differently. How engaged is that next generation? How well does the family communicate? How well, what is the vision of the family office? And if there's an operating company, what is the vision for that? Is everyone aligned? And those metrics are very, very different than measuring financial return, cost, revenues, etc. And the other thing that is really important is the impact that the family office is having, not only on this is, ESG, environment, social, and governance, but also internally and it's on its own family. And how are the family values being upheld within that family office structure? So there's a number of ways to measure non-financial performance of that family office. But Rick, you hit the nail right on the head. It's all about what do you expect from that structure, that family office? What are the goals? Where do we want to be in 2 to 5 years? And are we tracking that way? And that's very different from traditionally family offices were looked at in terms of, are we growing the family wealth? Are we minimizing taxes? Are we keeping costs to run the family office and keeping those costs down? So the broader scope is actually a very interesting and approach for family offices, and actually provides a lot more integration between the actual family office staff and the family members.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really intangible ways we measure impact is, are we able to help our staff learn and get ahead and move on to greater things? On the one hand, you don't want your people to leave because it causes a little bit of grief. On the other hand, every time that someone has grown so much in our organization that we can help them move on and do better for themselves, in our world, our family world, that's a success. That's having impact as well. So it's all bespoke.
Rick, I want to turn back to something that's come up again and again in what you've been talking about, and that's family, bringing the family. You can't say family office without family. At what point did you decide to bring in the rest of the family when you were going through the process of selling the business and starting Phase 3 Associates?
So as part of my 10-year journey to get ready, I found a group which advises family offices, and I joined them to learn, as I said, because I didn't even know what I didn't even know. And that was one of the suggestions they had. They asked me, do your kids know what you're worth, and do your kids know where all the money is? And I said no. And they strongly suggested that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, it would be a good idea for them to not be surprised. So we brought them in and sat them down and walked through everything and explained it to them. And it's been very, very helpful. As I said, my first oldest daughter and her husband, they're here in the office every single day. So they see everything, and I make sure that they see everything. Actually, they see everything first, and they tell me. My youngest daughter is married to a great guy who has his own successful business, and my younger daughter is at home with 2 kids at the moment. But we keep them informed at a very high level, and then they can come anytime and ask all questions, and we talk about it at the dinner table. So for us, it's been it was part of my learnings to bring the whole family in and educate them and get some input from them on what might happen if I do get hit by a bus tomorrow. So we talk about that a lot.
Right, interesting. And Tina, I know you and I had conversations about the family side of family governance. What are you seeing? What are you telling clients?
Well, I would agree with Rick, and I would add that it's never too early to talk to your children, your family members about the family wealth, because chances are they're going to hear it from their friends or neighbors, or they will find out. And I'm not suggesting that you open up the financial statements, from the very beginning, but just starting to bring them into the conversation. One thing that I've worked with families on that seems to really hit a sweet spot, and I think, Rick, this would really work with your family, is creating a family history book or a family history, where even the very youngest children are educated on where the great-grandparents started, what life was like, the struggles, the successes, the refreshing and restarting, and to show the family that this is where we are today, and our values are this way because of where we came from and where we want to go, and that non-financial legacy is really, really an important one. But when you have a family office, I find there's a great opportunity to bring in family members that perhaps weren't interested in working in an operating company, but they can work in various elements of that family office, whether it's the foundation or, Wesley, as you mentioned, it might be family governance. So family governance is about having conversations with the family to improve decision making. So it allows the family members to build relationships, increase communication, and that results in more trust among family members. And when we're looking at creating the 100-year legacy, it's very difficult to move to that stage without a family unit that communicates well, trusts each other, and can make decisions on a go-forward basis. And that family governance doesn't need to start at a family office. It can start earlier with an operating company. But when it's at that family office stage, it is a perfect opportunity to start to bring in other family members who perhaps were not included in that operating business.
Yeah, my two girls started off when they were 14. My oldest one was typing invoices, and my youngest one was driving forklift and piling lumber. But we talk a lot about generational wealth and the responsibility that will be entrusted to them and to my two son-in-laws for that generational wealth. And I think that's something that every family should start early, talking about the responsibility involved.
And one thing I often say, and I say that a lot, money is not a gift. And so, Rick, you alluded to the fact that, someone said, well, what if you get hit by a bus? But money is not a gift, and unprepared heirs find it very difficult to manage and understand where all the wealth is and what would mom and dad have wanted and what do we do with this great responsibility. We've never had to manage and make decisions on such a vast amount of wealth that it can often have negative consequences, and it may take them a few years to get into the groove of things. So educating, getting them involved as early as it is appropriate for your family, the better.
Great. Interesting question came in, Rick. If you had to build a family office all over again, knowing what you know today, what would you do differently?
Oh, there's always something. I think as in everything else that revolves around people, it took us a few times to get it right. I didn't have a CFO at my disposal. I didn't have an EA, I didn't have an HR team. I didn't have an IT team. I might have staffed up a little bit earlier with some really skilled people. I think that's the number one thing I would have done. We would have still ended up where we ended up, but it would have been a little less painful.
Perfect segue to another question that came in, which is what type or form of long-term compensation are you providing to senior executives? But I think it speaks to a bigger question, which is how are you attracting the right talent? And is hiring for a family office unique? Tina talked about the importance of staffing and managing that. What's your experience in that area?
Well, first of all, we have a culture, a family culture. That doesn't mean it's the same as every family has, but I would strongly, and again, we made a couple of flubs along the way, I would strongly recommend people who have been in family businesses, who understand the dynamics and who mesh with your culture. In terms of compensation, there's lots of different ways to do it without getting too specific, but the person that's responsible for the deal or that's managing the deal should definitely get a piece of the deal.
Does that line with what you're seeing, or what is your experience in this area?
Yeah, you didn't see me nodding, Rick, as you were saying that. So again, it really depends on the situation at hand, and that is often a way to encourage long-term staff. Staffing has been an issue since the beginning of COVID-19, and it's very difficult to bring in as well as retain top talent. So any way that there can be long-term incentives even can be very attractive for staff. And again, it all depends on what that family office is doing. In Rick's case, Rick, you said there are opportunities for these private investments, and allowing some of those senior members to have a hand in some of those deals makes an awful lot of sense. I've seen other family offices that really run like investment management firms, where they will allow their employees to pool money, and it's almost like a pooled investment, so that they actually share in some of the unique investment opportunities that the family office has that they might not otherwise be able to get involved in. So it is common.
Excellent. Next question is a bit targeted, and Tina, I'd like your thoughts on this. It says, the behavioral gap. Are you aware of any surveys of family offices which have measured the impact on investment returns, on changing investment strategy, or switching investment managers over time? There are numerous studies which measure this for the retail and pension plan industries. However, I have not seen this for family offices. I wonder if there's a similar leakage of returns or more or less for family offices.
Well, I would say that the research that is out there for pension plans is probably a good one to look at. And when I speak to clients about their investment strategy, it's really about having that long-term goal. Don't look at the returns every quarter, even every year. But sometimes it is clear that there's been an investment that was maybe not the best decision for the family and the family office, and knowing when to pull out of that is really important. Some of the long-term investments, private equity opportunities, have a very long lag line, so you may be stuck in it for 5 to 7 years. And so when you look at the pension plans, the way they're designed is they're designed to be there for 50 to 100 years. And so that approach really makes a lot of sense for family offices, where there's the goal to have intergenerational wealth. And that 9 times out of 10 is the goal for a family office. And so I think that while there is no research specifically on that for family offices, I have spoken to so many that really do take that pension plan approach. But I actually go one step further and say, of the family wealth that's being managed by this family office, if we chunk it into the shareholder liquidity needs, other needs that the family has coming up, then in that case, what is left behind, the family can take that pension approach, that long-term approach. And switching managers, just for the sake of switching managers, one might be up 1 year, one might be down. We've had a few years where some managers have outperformed the market, but now that we've seen a couple of quarters of declining stock market returns, for instance, a whole different set of managers are starting to outperform and do better. And so trying to chase that rate of return is often worse for when family offices do that.
Tina, I'll just add, because you mentioned what's your life of your investment. If I still had a huge salary coming in from somewhere, I'd put most of my money in private equity and then a certain amount in venture capital, knowing that for 10 years, you're not going to see that money, so you'll have no liquidity. But 10 years from now, I'm willing to bet you those two sectors will have done will have outperformed the market or anything else that we can do. Unfortunately, we and most family offices are not in the position where you can just tie it all up for 10 years. We do need some liquidity. So I'm with you. I'm not sure how you measure it. We measure it internally against ourselves. I'm not quite sure how other people's are, depending on their circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say, don't listen to your next door neighbor and what the rate of return they got on their portfolio, because either they're lying or you've missed the boat already. So just focus on what's important for you and your family. And I'm just quickly taking a look at the time. Maybe if we could go to Wesley, actually, are there any other pressing questions? That I know there's lots of questions coming in. Is there anything we can answer in in a few minutes?
Yeah, there's one question I think that ties into the discussion already that hopefully we can fit in. Rick, so it says, how many people are in your family office are members versus external?
Or I'm sorry, our family
External.
member?
So family members versus non-family members.
The only family is my daughter, who along with her colleague runs the philanthropic arm, and her husband, my son-in-law, who runs the investment arm. Everyone else are non-family members, although they're like family after this amount of time. And that's important for me to say that. Fantastic.
Well, yeah, I think as Tina mentioned, that brings us to the end of our time for the Q&A section. Rick, let me thank you again. It's been wonderful having this discussion with you.
Thank you for having me anytime.
And Tina, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Wesley, and thanks, Rick. Earlier, I mentioned how important it is for families to think about their needs, and Rick's, re-emphasized that. And so that's why family offices will always look different. But there was a question in the chat, and we've saved it to now because this might help answer it. It's a unique process and some tools that we've developed to support families who wish to set up a family office. And I know you can't see the slides, everything is so small, but it's also good for existing family offices who are looking to re-examine their roles and responsibilities. It's a process that really takes global leading practices in a number of categories of services. And we use those for comparison and for guidance for our family offices so that clients can actually build their own. So what do you need and how can we deliver at that stage? And we use a really innovative approach and we call it Wave Space. It helps to really accelerate the process design and implementation because it actually allows all of our clients to co-develop while using technology and hands-on activities. You can actually go up to your screen and type into it, and it allows the families to make decisions faster and with confidence. So this is not something that you do on your own. We can facilitate, and it goes through a bunch of different questions around potential services that family offices do provide, and then the make versus buy. What do we need? I know you can't see it, but there's sort of an org structure there to help decide what is this org structure going to look like? What are the roles that are going to be needed? And what are the objectives of those roles? So starting to create a job description. And then how does that family and that family office function and make sure that the communication lines are open. So we've got this here at the end. I know there were a few questions around, how can EY help family offices actually do this? We do this on a regular basis. And before we close, one final thing is that we are going to be doing more of these webinars in the future on a variety of topics, Wesley and I and some other folks within EY. And if we're fortunate enough to get a few more excellent clients like Rick to join us, then for sure it'll be an interesting session to join. We're going to talk about succession and intergenerational transitions, as well as our approach to parallel governance for the family office and the business. So stay tuned for more information. And with that, thank you. Thank you, Wesley, for moderating. Thanks again, Rick. Your information was invaluable. Thank you for sharing so much of your time, as well as your insights and personal journey with us today. And I really want to thank all of you for joining. Stay tuned for more to come, and bye for now.